This video gives you the exact list of topics to study for the Salesforce PD1 exam, so you stop wasting hours on stuff that barely matters. Most people think passing means going through the whole study guide, start to finish. Truth is, a small part of that guide does most of the work. The rest is filler. The exam itself is clear. 60 scored questions, plus 5 extra ones that don't count, in 105 minutes, and you need 68%, around 41 right answers, to pass. Almost every question puts you in a real scenario and asks for the right fix, not a textbook answer. Here's what to focus on, starting with the idea in almost every question. 1. Governor limits are the caps Salesforce puts on what your code can do in one transaction. 2 numbers matter most, up to 100 SOQL queries and 150 DML statements per transaction. Async code, like future methods or batch Apex, gets a fresh set of limits, which is why this comes up in large data volume questions. Once you know why these limits exist, the next topic makes more sense, since it's where developers break them the most. 2. Apex triggers. This next one is the biggest chunk of the exam, close to 30%, so it's top priority. Know trigger context variables and order of execution well, since the exam gives you a scenario and asks whether you need a before or after trigger, on insert or update. Watch for this trap. A trigger might work, but a flow is the smarter pick, so know when code beats a point-and-click tool. Finding this useful? Hit subscribe, more is coming. The detail that saves the most points. An answer with a SOQL query or DML statement inside a for loop is almost always wrong. The exam wants proof you can bulkify. Pull query results into a map once, before the loop, then use that map inside it instead of hitting the database repeatedly. Tight code only counts if you can prove it works, and that's the next piece. 3. Testing, debugging, deployment. About a fifth of the exam is in this section, and people often skip past it, though the rules are simple once you see them. The big one, an average of 75% code coverage to deploy Apex, and every trigger needs some coverage of its own. Build test data using a factory pattern instead of pulling from records already in your org. Test.startTest and Test.stopTest give your code fresh governor limits for the core of the test, useful for async code, and always use system.assert, since a test with no check proves nothing. What's tripped you up here? Say so in the comments. On debugging, expect a log with an error, and you'll spot the root cause, usually a governor limit or a null pointer exception. On deployment, know a change set for connected orgs like sandbox to production from the more flexible Salesforce CLI. Once your code is tested, the next question is what it's built on. 4. LWC, Visualforce, and data. On this exam, the interface topic isn't about how things look. It's about the code behind what the user sees and clicks. LWC is the modern standard. Know the component lifecycle at API for public properties, at Wire for pulling in Salesforce data, and calling Apex from an LWC almost always needs at Aura enabled. Worth knowing if your notes are old. Since Spring 20, most LWC fields are reactive by default, so you rarely need a track. And seeing it used for no reason often means the answer is outdated. Share that with anyone still studying old notes. Visualforce is older but still tested at a basic level, so know standard controllers, custom controllers, and controller extensions. On data, know your relationships. Lookup and master detail differ sharply on ownership, sharing, and what happens when the parent is deleted. So a record that must go with its parent needs master detail. Apex runs in system mode by default, ignoring the user's permissions, unless the class is marked with sharing. None of this matters until you can pull the right data, which brings us to the last piece. 5. SOQL and SOSL. You can't pass this exam without knowing how Salesforce pulls its own data. Focus on relationship queries. Child to parent uses simple dot notation, while parent to child needs a nested query inside your select statement. Know the split between the two languages. SOQL is for when you already know which object you're searching. SOSL is for searching one word across many objects when you're not sure where it is. If this is saving you study time, a like helps more people find it. This connects back to where we started, since a tight query keeps you from breaking the governor limits in the first place. So to sum up, governor limits set the rules of the game, triggers carry the biggest share of your score, testing and deployment cover a big chunk of easy points, and LWC, data, and queries tie the platform together. That's the short list that actually moves your score, and it's much easier than reading the whole guide start to finish. Get into a developer org, write code every day, and build small projects around these 5 topics. Passing PD1 opens real doors, and now you know what to focus on.